Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this, welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody. That is hopefully for somebody. My name is Kyle Naranya, and on episode 106, interesting 666, maybe there's some parallel here to this week's review, where I will be reviewing yet another legacy sequel, this time with Michael Keaton's probably second most iconic character of all time. That is, of course, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. As for every review, there will be a non-spoiler section and a spoiler section. Timecodes will be listed in the description. And to end the outro, there will be a little special review, just a teeny tiny one of a show that I was able to watch during this previous week. But I don't want to spoil it here. You'll have to check the end of the episode for that. Let's jump into non-spoiler thoughts of Beetlejuice Beetlejuice.
Here's a preview. Be warned, it's intense.
Beetlejuice as a franchise has had a long-rumored sequel in development. There's famously was Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, which was a film that almost was made. We are 36 years from the original. The film premiered at the 81st Venice International Film Festival and then was released on September 6th to worldwide audiences. This time, not even this time, it's the same director, Tim Burton. Screenplay from this one from Alfred Goff and Miles Millar. They worked on Wednesday as well as the creators of Smallville. There's some similarities there, and story credit also goes to Seth Grahame-Smith. As I tweeted for this review, I think I am going to bother some people, which is that I don't like this movie. What it comes down to ultimately for me is, while of course it is interesting to visit this world again, the aesthetic is always interesting with a Tim Burton world, this one being a substantially more practical universe, which is super great compared to Dumbo and the Alice in Wonderland films that Tim had worked on before. And there might be even a character in this film that addresses Tim's recent relationship with Hollywood. Unfortunately, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice suffers from being more. That's quite honestly it. There are story elements that feel surface level at best, unfortunately, and there are too many subplots. Some of them could have been really interesting, but unfortunately are completely sidestepped to move on to other things. The focus of the film at its core could have been quite a heartwarming and interesting tale. Unfortunately, it's one that I personally feel was done better in some earlier films recently that also explored this particular relationship, that of an estranged daughter from her mother, who is obviously very quirky with Winona Ryder. Oh boy, Michael Keaton in this is fun. He is very entertaining as the character. There's been a complaint about the screen time of Beetlejuice, who was not in the original for he was in the original for about the same amount of time, but because of that, this film is fun at revisiting this Beetlejuice world. It's a very Tim Burton-esque design. All of the production design being physical was obviously a treat. Catherine Sutherland, Winona Ryder, Michael Keaton returning, them being the only returning characters from the original, and then a bunch of new side characters. There are too many side characters. One in particular being Monica Bellucci, who unfortunately is given absolutely nothing to do, is unfortunate. I was looking forward to this. Now, I should probably preface this. If you are a fan of Wednesday, you probably will like this, having Jenna Ortega as the lead. She's a very talented actress. Quite frankly, I thought she was really great in the Scream movies that she's been in. But because she's not really given a ton to do, they introduced some quite interesting concepts, particularly with what estranged her from Winona Ryder, her mom, Lydia Dietz, could have been really interesting. But a lot of this movie, and I feel that I am alone in this given the critical reception to the film, feels as if it is an extended pilot for a television series that drops some elements or lays the groundwork for them to be addressed later, which quite frankly, being a legacy sequel like that, I don't like that was the element where we're revisiting this world. I want it to be worth the investment, but there are a lot of unanswered, not a lot. There are certain unanswered questions. Being a centerpiece of the film leaving them unanswered makes the conclusion to the film feel incomplete, which is disappointing. I like Tim Burton. Growing up on his films like Beetlejuice, the original Batman, some of the other work, his work as a producer on The Nightmare Before Christmas. There's a lot of films that Tim made while I was growing up that were fundamental. He worked on a lot of other projects and famously has had an interesting relationship with Hollywood, particularly in the last 15 years. It's unfortunate that I don't think just having more of Tim Burton's aesthetic is enough anymore. Michael Keaton has been on record saying this is the movie they wanted to make, and I find that really interesting. Of course, in particular, Michael having come off of The Flash, as well as Batgirl, which was canceled. This movie is, outside of being more of it, doesn't offer truly anything we haven't seen before. Of course, you're going to get some newer character designs with Willem Dafoe's character and the not garish, but cartoony garish elements that the Beetlejuice world has, and the uniqueness to which they are able to establish the afterlife was a great idea in the original, and getting to see more of it could have been really interesting. But the actual journey of the underworld is underdeveloped in my opinion, and to me that's what left me feeling the most frustrated. Overall, I think the film is fine. It introduces so many things that on their own easily could have been the focus of the movie, but because they aren't, they were either dropped quite quickly or they are underutilized with what the film seems to be about. I'm left confused because I know that I am in the minority when it comes to the reception to this movie. I think generally it's fun to see Michael Keaton be this outlandish character of Beetlejuice. He is offside in every regard, and everyone is constantly trying to keep him under control, which is fun. He is the deal with the devil, and the relationships that he has ensue. There are some fun cameos throughout the film. It's nice to see Danny Elfman do a score for a movie he likes, unlike the theatrical cut of Justice League. I'm trying not to be rude or mean, but I left the film feeling quite disappointed. I know there was a lot of expectation for the return to this film, or this film franchise, but there's been a question. Screen Rant tweeted this out this weekend, which was, do you want more from this? And of course you could title the third film in this franchise Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. If this is what we are going to get from this universe, I don't personally feel like I want more. It's interesting because what we have in the film and what we're given could have worked as a pilot, and that might have been more interesting if we had a Max streaming service show where Beetlejuice is the antagonist to a bunch of different people who have entered the afterlife. May have worked better narratively or almost as an anthology series, but he's given a story that initially, which is what brings his character forward, which is essentially just put to the side once the other reunion relationships start to develop. And they feel completely disjointed from each other, almost as if there are different small stories or short stories kind of woven together. I really would like to know how this story did come together. Again, it's really interesting because Beetlejuice, or a sequel to Beetlejuice, has long essentially been wrapped up in development hell. It's been something Tim Burton has wanted to work on, but never really hit the ground running until eventually it did near the early 2020s. And because of that, it falls under it felt stale. Of course, it's going to have a rising A-lister in somebody like Jenna Ortega. It's great to see Winona Ryder in a big blockbuster film, her getting a resurgence from critically with her roles in something like Stranger Things. Catherine Sutherland, of course, having Schitt's Creek. She's going to be in The Last of Us season 2 coming up. Willem Dafoe has always been great in general, and quite frankly, I would have loved to have seen more of his character Justin Theroux's character is one I'm going to be discussing more in spoilers. I left the film feeling kind of hollow, which is really unfortunate. I'm going to be critical of this because my expectations were high, but in spoilers, I feel that I will be able to more coherently explain what the film presents and why it fails that presentation. So I don't really have anything else to say other than that. I think the movie is fine. It's a surface level return to the Beetlejuice universe that, as was seen with its worldwide reception, grossing $145 million. Clearly, it will be a success. It just wasn't for me. So I'm not going to waste any more time in non-spoilers. Let's jump into spoilers, and I can go through each major character's plot points and their relationships and quite frankly, why it didn't work for me.
When you're all driving carpool and banging your Pilates instructors to fill the empty voids in your life, we'll see who gets the last laugh.
What happened?
As the film opens, we see that Lydia has a television series called Ghost House where she goes to not even rich people, but Americans, people's houses to talk to the dead. She has developed this gift since the original film, and she can talk and see to the dead. However, she cannot see and talk to her ex-husband who passed away in the Amazon, and this creating a rift with her and her daughter, which because of that, she does not believe that her mom can see the dead. Lydia is married, or not married, that's a plot point, is dating Justin Theroux's character Rory, who, as I mentioned in spoilers, has to be a metaphor for Tim's at least perception of his relationship with Hollywood, which is he's somebody who takes advantage of the less disenfranchised, people who are at their worst possible place, who can money grub off of other people's success. That has to be Tim's relationship, at least how he perceives his relationship was with Hollywood, with films like 2 Alice in Wonderland's films, making a live-action remake of Dumbo. If it's not, then it really makes no sense to me why that character is in the movie to begin with. But the inciting incident is that Winona Ryder's dad dies, Charles. He went down in a plane crash and was eaten by a shark. And we get a very comical dead version of him. It's an element of the Beetlejuice franchise that I do actually quite enjoy, which is people are dead, at least their exterior is, in the state to which they passed away, which is really funny. Catherine Sutherland, Delia, has of course continued her art craze. The body is the human canvas and all these other things, and they are all reuniting for Charles's funeral, which will be held in, is it Winter Garden? I actually can't remember what the place is called. I want to say it's Winter Garden. Where is it? Winter River. And in this, Lydia is having a hard time trying to reconnect with her daughter, an element that Astrid doesn't seem to care about whatsoever. This is the core of the film, and it is quite interesting in trying to have these two characters reconnect after a loss and some substantial time apart, and the journey that they go on to reunite them. If that sounds familiar, for me personally, it sounds exactly like what is ultimately the story of Everything Everywhere All at Once, which did this infinitely better. And that's my problem. There are hurdles or speed bumps that are or barriers that are introduced throughout this film that easily could have been the focus and preventing their relationship from reigniting or healing. And a key part of that is Astrid does not believe that Lydia can actually see ghosts. She can't see her dad. Well, of course, why wouldn't you see my birth father? And this would help us get some closure because his body was never found. He was eaten by piranhas, as we see later on in the movie. And Rory winds up seeing ghosts. She sees this boy or teen who killed his parents, and he manipulates her in wanting to take her life so he can return to the land of the living. As a major conflict, that's really compelling. What would Astrid really feel? How would she react to the fact that she is seeing ghosts like her mother? Her mom was telling the truth. What does this mean? It would completely change her whole perspective. She talks about science and what it means and basing things on fact. But as soon as she enters this world, she kind of just accepts and absorbs everything, which is really disappointing because having that be a key part of her character, that's enough of a defining feature and reasoning for your opposition to your mom that could easily have been the main conflict of the story. However, because obviously this is Beetlejuice, Lydia uses Beetlejuice to get to the afterlife to try and then find her daughter. Again, that is enough. The movie has enough in it. However, we need a side plot of Beetlejuice's original wife, played by Monica Bellucci, chasing after them. She unfortunately is in the movie for probably a grand total of 4 scenes. I love Monica Bellucci. She's been in a lot of phenomenal projects. The Matrix, ironically, which yesterday I saw the original for the first time in theaters. I've seen it before, owned it on Blu-ray and 4K, but I was 9 when it came out, so getting to see that on the big screen was amazing. I digress. That character and that momentum for her to be in the movie to push Beetlejuice to want to remarry Lydia doesn't really make sense, and I'll tell you why. The reason is Lydia starts to believe she can see Beetlejuice popping up in other places. Why? The movie should explain that it's because of Rory getting to the afterlife and Beetlejuice being aware of who died. We see that he's reading the obits, would then start to connect to her to use that as his con to then marry Lydia and return to the land of the living. But no, that's not actually explored. It's, oh my God, my ex-wife is coming here, but if I get married, then I'll be fine. Which doesn't really make sense. There are too many threads already. And to add on top of that, Delia dies. She's killed by asps, which she believes were defanged. And she also enters the afterlife in searching of Charles, not believing that she's truly dead. To get Lydia into the afterlife, Beetlejuice has to break her in, thus introducing Willem Dafoe's character, who is a former actor who is functioning as a police chief. That's fine. I don't think you need Willem Dafoe's character to be investigating the murders that Monica Bellucci's character is doing. Him just following Beetlejuice because Beetlejuice has brought in a live person into the afterlife, similar to something like Coco, no shade thrown, is enough of a conflict. Monica Bellucci, I love you, don't need to be in this movie. They should have focused the film and removed all these subplots because it works with those elements. That in itself is compelling enough narrative, and the hero's journey, quite literally, that Astrid would have to go on with the challenges she faces, in that would be enough. Her fighting for her life back, that's a good enough story. We see Astrid's father and Lydia's ex-husband in the afterlife, and that provides a quite heartwarming scene. But with Beetlejuice in it, the boy who stole her soul is dealt with probably at about the halfway point of the movie, which just feels like an add-on. And that to me was the most disappointing part. There are some really great ideas introduced in this movie, but are pushed aside for less interesting storytelling. Again, you don't need the Astrid thing. You could, or having her soul stolen. What if because of the both, and this is not what it should have been. It's more so you introduce some of these elements, but we don't explore them enough. Delia dying and Charles dying could be trauma enough to which Astrid potentially sees them and wants to bring them back, or it's too much for them to deal with losing both of her parents, well, one being a stepmom, her relationship with Astrid being fractured, but Astrid finally seeing the dead. But all of these elements are dealt with on the surface level. That, to me, was the most frustrating part of the movie. Michael Keaton, his dynamic with all of these characters is always fun. Willem Dafoe's character, it's Willem Dafoe. You're never going to get tired of Willem Dafoe. But because of that, this, as I've said, surface level exploration of these concepts or ideas, the movie doesn't feel elevated in any regard. Justin Theroux is funny as he's just playing this piece of garbage executive from Hollywood and is manipulating Lydia into marriage on Halloween and ultimately he reaches an untimely demise, or his timely demise, not untimely, because he's a piece of garbage. But is this what people want? In waiting for a sequel to this for 36 years, as I said in non-spoilers, it winds up just feeling like more. There are concepts and ideas here that I found really interesting, but because of the breakneck pace in which we had to resolve everything, this movie is not 2 hours long. It's 104 minutes. Add 16 more minutes maybe, or I don't know. For whatever reason, even with the budget of this that it did have, $100 million, the practical elements are fun, revisiting some of these worlds. The pop culture elements that Beetlejuice does bring into the film are fun. But a bare minimal surface level exploration of this film left me very underwhelmed, which at the end of the day is why I felt disappointed. I was excited by a lot of the things that were introduced, but because of how quickly everything seemed to be sidestepped for a story very familiar to a lot of people, I'm disappointed. I know that a lot of people clearly have enjoyed this film. I know that I'm in the minority when it comes to the reception of this, but I pretty much explained everything that happened outside of the fact that Delia does reunite with Charles and they go on to the beyond the afterlife or whatever it is. We do get a mention of Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin's character that they did move on, and the character of Charles is played by puppets, and you can look up why that's the case. Danny DeVito has a fun cameo. The zombies that work for Beetlejuice are quite funny, but they're just there as a dilemma to Monica Bellucci's character. So I'm really curious if there was an extended version for this. As frustrated as I probably sound, as I said, I would like to see if there was an extended version of this. Is there another 20 minutes? Because I feel like there must be. Given all of the things in the movie, there certainly has to have been more of an exploration of that. If there's not, then I'm really confused as to why all of these elements were maintained. Was this part of the problem with this film being constantly in pre-production forever? Did we keep too many ideas from previous scripts? I'm not sure, but you can tweet at me, email me, let me know what you thought of the film. Do you completely disagree with what I had to say? I'm really curious. So I have nothing else to say about that. Let's move into my mini review that's going to be a surprise, and then we'll wrap up with question of the week. So over the past couple weeks, my kids have gotten into the Sonic movies, the 2 live-action films, which are unequivocally better than the Super Mario film in my opinion. I've not reviewed any of them, but I did do a trailer reaction for Sonic 3, which, without beating around the bush, I think looks absolutely incredible. And because of that, for whatever reason, I had a trial for Paramount Plus. And if you were following along with me, I watched Knuckles on Paramount Plus. And I have to say 2 major things because I wanted to mention this show. I know it came back in April, but it's never too late to talk about things. Look at what I did the previous week with all of the summer TV shows. I thought this show was absolutely hilarious. It is by no means made for children. And not that it is too adult, but it takes all of the elements of making an older millennial the lead of the film or of the TV series, and it continues that Thor 1 element of Knuckles the Echidna learning about the human culture, what it means to be a North American, a fan of music, pop culture, and whatnot. And it's about him helping Wade win a bowling tournament against his long-abandoned father. It's ridiculous. This show was wildly entertaining. My wife and I watched it over the span of 2 days, so I guess 3 episodes and 3 episodes. It's very funny. The fact that The Warrior by Scandal is the theme song for this is absolutely hilarious. It certainly fits in that realm of growing up with things from the 80s, the absurdness of what's going on, and Knuckles becoming a passionate fan of Jewish traditions and cultures, being a member of a Shabbat with Wade's dysfunctional family. I was so entertained. I found it so funny and so random at times that if it's not important for Sonic 3, even regardless, it is a spinoff worth your time, and I would have been remiss without mentioning it. I loved it. I thought it was really, really funny. It's on Paramount Plus, as I mentioned, the owner of the Sonic franchise, but considering I'm really looking forward to Sonic 3 in 3 months, this was nice as almost an appetizer to this universe of more Sonic content. So that's my mini review of Knuckles. It's really funny, it's worth your time, and it's random as hell.
Can I ask you a question? Just fun?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
Last week's question of the week was, what was your favorite final season of a TV show? Dylan Pollock of Movies to Watch Before You Die writes in, my favorite final season is Too Hard. Maybe Breaking Bad, just incredible, and escalates every episode. My least favorite for sure is Dexter, which just punished me for watching for so long. That's fair. Keen Machine writes in, I've recently completed a watch through of The Walking Dead, and I have to say they did a surprisingly decent job with ending such an extensive series. I'll say the last season of that show was good, and I'm glad I stuck out to see it. Keen Machine. I did not stick to all of all of The Walking Dead. Good for you, Keen Machine. Scotty Cameron writes in, the final season of Hannibal is my favorite. I love that the second half of Hannibal's final season is an adaptation of Red Dragon, the first book in that universe, if you're curious. And it's probably better than the 2 film adaptations of the novel, even though it's less faithful than them. I also love how it feels like every show built up to its finale and stuck the landing. Now the song Love Crime is playing in my head and repeat. Sorry about that, Scotty. M. Bully Bulls writes in, final season of a show, Breaking Bad comes to mind. James Strecker writes in, Battlestar Galactica. Everyone hates on the ending, but I thought the last few episodes were some of the most badass of the whole show. Not many shows stick the landing, but Battlestar Galactica did it for me. And Stephanie Little writes in, I honestly don't know. I want to say Ted Lasso, but I feel like that's almost a cop-out since there was only three seasons. It just felt like a satisfying ending, and that's all I want from a final season. Interestingly enough, we're getting a season 4 of that show. Which leads me to this week's question of the week. What is your favorite Tim Burton film? I reviewed one obviously here, but I'm really curious how many Batmans are out there, how many Beetlejuices, or of the lesser popular ones, maybe Sweeney Todd, Edward Scissorhands. I'm really curious. Could be Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I'm not sure. To let me know about that, you can email the podcast filmreelistspod@gmail.com. Next week's episode is going to be a little interesting one. It is for sure going to be a review of Terminator 0, which is currently on Netflix. I know I am behind on that show. And if I can find time, I am going to see Speak No Evil. It looks terrifying. I have to see it during the daytime, but I'm a scaredy cat when it comes to horror films. So that's what I'm going to do. If I don't get to see it, it will just be Terminator 0, maybe some other things, but for the next couple weeks, all of that stuff is scheduled out. So make sure you are following on all your favorite social media platforms. The podcast is available on all of those. If you haven't yet, please follow on a podcast platform as it helps the show out, as well as leaving a 5-star review. My name is Kyle Naranya, and I hope to see you